is Radford. I work at R3 Consulting, and I assisted in putting together these forms. So I'd like the presentation to be interactive, so please raise your hand if you have any questions as I go through. We are also recording this presentation so that we can post it up on the Zero Waste Marin website, so that people who didn't attend today are still able to see the presentation, and hopefully your questions will also help inform other resources that we have available to everyone, including the inspectors and contractors who are trying to fill out these forms. So before I get started, I was wondering how many of you use this form on a regular basis? Or would you say that you're comfortable and familiar with the way the form works? Yeah? Okay, great. So it sounds like some of you guys don't, so hopefully this is going to be helpful for your understanding of sort of how it's intended to work through the process. And also, are there any cities represented here who are not actively implementing this form right now? No? Okay, great. That's wonderful. Okay, so I think we'll just get started. So, I had one other thing. So I have my business cards right here. So please take one and send me or Judith an email anytime if you have questions or if strange things come up during the process of using the forms. So just grab a business card, please.
Yeah, getting close.
Okay. So next slide. All right, so just briefly, we're going to go through what is required under the Cal Green diversion pieces of the code, the review and approval process, and we're going to step through that for the permit applicant and also for the inspectors. We're going to talk about some new resources that Zero Waste Marin has developed. Specifically, there's a new advanced method form because before this, we didn't have a construction waste management plan template. So this is intended to make that process a little bit easier. And then we can just sort of discuss the, form and whatever questions you might have at the end. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so 65% diversion by either weight or by volume is required under Cal Green Code. So this could be accomplished by doing source separation at the job site itself. So putting all of the wood into one container, and then if it happens to be 65%, if the total volume of material that leaves the job site, boom, you've hit that. Or it could be just one box at the site, and then if that box is delivered to a facility that achieves good diversion of the material, then that would be also considered meeting the 65% diversion requirement. Okay, well, so there's a little bit more detail here on the two methods. So you probably are going to see a cheaper cost when you're doing source separation at the job site, because you might get discounts for materials that are higher value. But it's going to require a little bit more coordination. And the sorting of the mixed C&D, that's going to, basically, we're talking about sorting the material rather than at the job site. It's sorted on a sort line at the facility. And we're also probably going to see lower diversion overall from that method, just because once you get like dirt mixed in, for example, like that dirt, it's going to be a lot harder to separate that at a facility. So it's better for diversion to source separate at a job site if that's possible and feasible.
Question.
Yes.
Last year we discussed what your group is helping to bring the cost of the bin or supply material, the diversion of material on the site cheaper. I don't know what was the outcome, because when you're mixing, for example, you got the wood and the sheet rock, middle of the construction, rain is coming, and it's going to mix. How are you going to separate, even if you send it to the facility, how are you going to separate wood and residue of the sheet rock? Versus if you guys bring the cost of the rental of the bin lower, then the contractor is willing to do that way and easier for them, because usually the contractor or subcontractor or sheetrocker come in, you know, that's the main for a sheetrock, that's the main for scrap wood, so at the end it's gonna be transferred to recycling, straight and clean. But the cost right now is, the place is charging is too expensive. And none of the
You're talking about for mixed or for
no,
like?
for the physically renting the bin or a box,
But I'm saying
debris box.
for a bin for, for wood versus a bin for all
No, it's
materials,
overall,
let's
it's if you wanna rent a box,
say? Separate
box.
separate box, if you come separate box, it'll make it easier for contractor or builder, and gradually we train these guys to follow the same format, rather than mix. Like right now, the cheapest one, the latest one I checked was a smaller, around 8 cubic yard is almost $600 per week. So none of the contractors gonna spend that kind of money, they dump it, do something, and we keep fighting in one hand, but you guys wanna promote, on the hand, we need to do something
Right.
properly to gain some result,
So
otherwise.
to try and figure out a way for the haulers to differentiate their pricing if they're picking up a source separated load versus the mixed.
Right.
No, it's not the cost of the mix, the cost is the rent of the
I
box.
understand, but I'm saying if you're gonna rent something just for wood, you should get a price break on the rental. It
So
shouldn't
they're not
cost the same.
separating it, correct.
That's, because we don't, I don't have a lot of control over how they set the pricing, but I can encourage, I can ask if they would consider a pricing structure, because it is better for them as well. If like Marin Sanitary picks up just wood, it's significantly better for them than to have to send it over their sort line and whatnot. So you should, that improved quality of material should pass down at the job site.
But also to bring the rental of the box down,
Right.
so the contractor billing, instead of renting one box, renting 3 box.
Yeah.
And put us like, so promoting, we do that way rather than $600, pay $600 for 3 box, because at the end it still is the same thing, maybe just 1 or 2 trips more.
Yeah.
But on site, there's, sometimes you're lucky if you got room for 1 box,
Yeah,
let alone
it's a space
3.
issue.
I mean, a lot of these locations don't have
Yeah.
a lot of.
Correct, yeah.
But it's safe, it'd be safe to assume primarily in a construction job, the excavation work, concrete, dirt, usually go directly into a truck for off-haul, and everything else goes into the bin. Is that the kind of separation that you would expect to have? Is that the primary concern of the dirt being mixed with wood and sheetrock and everything else?
It's definitely a good practice to separate out the excavation materials and have that go out separately from the mixed C&D. But just in general, mixing any kinds of materials is going to make the diversion less. It's not just the dirt,
Okay.
but yeah.
So there's also, the flip side of that is, when I was running jobs, I would have a bin set up with Spanish and English on it, like this is wood only, this is trash only, and nobody could ever figure that out. So I would constantly get charged once the bin made it to, to the yard. They would call me back and say, hey, now we gotta charge you $400 more because this is a mixed bin. So I
Yeah.
just ended up saying, none of my bins are solo bins anymore. You guys sort it, because my guys can't figure it out. My signs don't work. So
Yeah.
ultimately, it's the superintendents on the job are basically gonna say, just give me one bin. I'm chucking everything in it. You guys figure it out.
Mhm.
That's what I
We're in
do.
sanitary, they just charge 1 fee, I mean, they sort everything, so, cause it hits the floor, they dump them on the floor.
Yeah.
And then they have their sort line that they can through, so. Because I thought that was the deal, is like, when we're looking at the forms, if the receipts are coming from the sanitary, we're assuming that they've met the requirement,
Yeah.
because.
That's
so,
right.
And Nevada's the only one, like, we're kinda odd, because you have to, if you're doing C&D up there, you have to specify, so you get the special ticket, and then they have you dump in a different place, where it gets sorted supposedly down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what's that?
I think he needs it.
Yeah, and Nevada. Yeah.
Register.
Yeah, it's a great advantage that you all have in Marin, having the Marin Resource Recovery Center so accessible and available with such great diversion practices. So you're making a really good point there. And of course, Redwood in Nevada is also certified as long as it ends up in the C&D
Right,
pile,
right,
which
they
is
got
what
the
you're.
one pile for that, but I mean, like
Yeah.
a Grange or somebody's going in there, cause everyone else is dumping here, I mean, all of,
In MRC?
yeah, all Garbarino's guys are dumping there,
Yeah.
it's Grange and, any of the other carriers might take it up to the bottom just cause it's cheaper, but they would have to specify that, I mean, you're paying them for a one that's supposedly separated, whether it ends up in that pile or not, but.
Rent's
That's- yeah.
cheaper anyway. It's cheaper than the bottle anyway, for me anyway,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think what everyone's bringing up, there's a lot of disadvantages for the contractor, and I've been there, I know. The first thing you're always gonna recycle is gonna be your concrete and rebar. That's gonna be something that's really easy to do if you're doing a demolition, just because that's the only phase of the project that you're truly on. But you ultimately will go to a mixed C&D container, and the only reason you do that is because you have all the limitations that they're talking about, the size of the space. Most importantly, the rental on the bins is gonna cost you, you're gonna have to move those every 2 weeks. There's no way you're gonna fill full bins, even if you go down to 10-yarders every 2 weeks. So what happens is that you end up and they'll charge you in a rental time on those bins afterwards. So what happens is you fill them to the limit you can, and then you don't maximize the minimum limit that they give you, because they usually give you about 6 tons on a container before, that's where you hit your minimum limit. If you haul it off after, 2 tons, you're not getting your money's worth out of that. And then what happens is mixed C&D becomes a real easy default for you, because during the regular stage of construction, after you pass your framing, then everything else becomes mixed anyway. It's really hard to keep everybody's stuff separate. You're pushing it all in the same exact piles, and from there on out, there's really not much value in the scrap that you're generating, because there's really nothing much more that the guys even in the landfill at that level really want. So, and when you get to your sheetrock phase, if you're lucky, you can get all the cut off and all the waste and all it's taken out, but you'll typically find that even your sheetrocker who stocks it will be on one load, and then the person who actually finishes hanging, that will be enough that you could fill a container, or they might just take it off by truck. So, and I find that it's interesting to see if there's any value left over at the end for the person who's ultimately receiving it. And so that's why we all say, okay, mix C&D, dump it right in there, and it's a free-for-all. Anyway, that's been my experience with construction and how it really runs.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's actually one of the reasons that we initially put together this main form, sort of oriented around the easy method, which is really using the mixed C&D boxes. And we can get into the mechanics of that form a little bit in the rest of the presentation.
How many of the carriers don't take it to Garbarino? I mean, how many take it? I mean, I'm just wondering, out of all the boxes that are done here in Marin, how many of them are going to places where they're not being separated by the facility?
That's, we've been spending a little bit of time discussing that with the various haulers. The county is so large that we haven't had an opportunity to get enough information to fully answer your question. We do think that most are bringing it to source separation and not to garbage. And that's part of the reason that the easy method form, if you're using a debris box, that the permit applicant is supposed to be asking their hauler to get that weight ticket, so that when you end up getting this form back, you're still seeing a weight ticket that still says a material type.
Right.
And so if it says that it was garbage, then that's the point at which sort of the regulation happens. Do you have anything to add on that?
Well, I don't know that we know how much of the C&D is going to what facility. I mean, we assume geographically that most of it's gonna end up at MRRC.
Right.
And we know some of it's going to Redwood, but not a lot of it, because I get quarterly reports about how much C&D they're getting, or that's being, that someone's paying that premium to have their load identified as such. It's not a lot.
Right.
But, also contractors are gonna leave the county with their material, so, and we know that a lot of contractors come into the county, so I know that MRRC is getting material from San Francisco and Alameda and Richmond, so, you think that would be an easy question to answer?
Yeah, I'm just curious
but
because
it's kind of a dance and.
Yeah, I mean, just the
So
fact that
everybody has it.
a lot of them are locally or
Just
going
pass
to,
it.
over to more
Just like a
sanitary.
hundred day
If
advance
we're,
method.
I mean,
Yeah.
then the paperwork is kind of,
Right, and that is something we've talked to R3 about, like the idea of like, okay, so if we know that, for example, Mill Valley Refuse is always taking load, every load they pick up as a hauler for C&D, they're going to MRRC, do we need the C&D facility, do we need the form from, the weight ticket from MRRC, or is it enough to just to say, okay, Mill Valley picked it up, we know it went to MRRC, and kind of, that would be an easing of the arduous paper trail process, so that is something we're thinking about, but we haven't actually executed it or said, yeah, you don't have to. I think actually, Mill Valley is the exception. Mill Valley, you're coming from Mill Valley here, right? Don't you guys say if Mill Valley Refuse picks it up, then that's enough? You don't actually need the weight ticket from the
Yeah,
destination facility?
yeah,
Because you know
typically,
that-
yeah,
So,
yeah, we're trying to train several people, but yeah, that's how
Yeah.
it used to be, yeah.
yeah,
I've seen Mill Valley up at Redwood.
I know,
so there's
Yeah.
that. So
I have
that's
seen
why
Mill
we.
Valley dumping at Redwood.
Yes.
So we have.
Do you know anything about where it goes after?
Redwood is just a one.
Like, there was an article in May in the Wall Street Journal that we were reading in our office, about how China isn't buying as much from us, and it's gonna be a real problem, and actually the costs are gonna go up to dispose of. I'm just curious if we know kind of where we're giving our.
Yeah. So because we could go into a lot of detail about the impacts of the new policies in
Yeah,
China,
yeah.
but they mainly affect the curbside recycling.
Okay.
A lot of the
Yes.
markets for the C&D are local, more
Because
local.
the stuff's so
That's good.
heavy, right?
Yeah.
Carrots
Yeah.
are not getting on a truck and going on a, yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
Metals are impacted, I would guess. You
Yeah.
know, the metals, percent metals are impacted, so, but there are reasonable markets for metals and locally. Wood is something that, is an issue, in the area. And there's a lot of wood that's still being discarded. So,
What about concrete?
most of the well, what I know that happens to concrete is it does basically end up at Redwood and it's ground down and it's used at their facility for roadbed. You know, it's just like,
More concrete.
yeah. But yeah, the China situation is a situation.
Yeah, we could have an entire hour just talking about that. Yeah, but thanks for that question. Okay, so this slide, unfortunately you can't see it very well, but this is an example of a sorting line after delivery to a facility for sorting. So this is the mixed C&Ds here, and you see that there's some people that are pulling out the valuable materials, and then at the end of this line, things are getting dropped off, and that's essentially the residual that ends up at landfill. Okay. I think I have another picture slide too. Okay, so and then there's the source separated wood, just sort of standing. We were looking at the sort line, and then we're just looking down into the bin that they have there. Okay, so just discussing the facilities a little bit, and we were just talking about that the Marin Sanitary Service facility is probably the one that's used the most. But on this form that we've been using this whole time, on this page, you can see that there's a number of other facilities that are also allowed to be used with this form. I do have a little question. So of those of you who do receive this form, do you ever see weight tickets from these other facilities that are not Redwood Landfill or Marin's Sanitary Service?
Not really.
Everyone just stays pretty much within the county. Okay, that was my suspicion, but so basically, so we have these facilities, and then we also have some reuse facilities that are also allowed to be used under the easy method. And for everyone's information, Zero Waste Marin does intend to do a certification round next year, and new reuse facilities are gonna be added to this list. And another note on this, the old form, we had the away station, that's number 10 on the map. They closed, and we're replacing them with Green Links, which is another reuse facility which is recently opened. Okay. All right. There's the map. I don't think we need to go into that unless anybody has any questions. Okay, so the sort of stepping through the process for a permit applicant, you would receive so we're calling this the pre-construction demolition plan, that's the first page, and then the post-construction documentation is this last page, but that's only under the easy method. So they're supposed to be choosing basically between the easy method, which is represented here, and then the advanced method, which is described in more detail under the Cal Green Code. So let's see the next slide. Okay, what's that? So this is just what we've described already. So this is the post-construction recycling documentation. And a really big point here is that you still need to see a weight ticket for under the easy method. Just like the verbal confirmation that they brought it to one of those facilities is really not enough, and we want to see weight tickets for all of the materials that are coming out of that site.
And I feel like one thing that must be confusing, because it's sort of confusing to me, is if you are a building inspector and you're trying to approve this form, and you're sort of saying, okay, it was a 10,000 square foot remodel, and I've got one weight ticket. Like, is that enough? Are we good? And that's really kind of falls on you guys to be able to say no. Like, that's not enough. Like, there's definitely gonna be more. There should have been more, and why isn't there more? And to push back a little bit.
We tell them that they don't get a final until this is right,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, it just comes through the woodwork. All these receipts.
Okay.
Then they do it right, because they know they won't get a final.
So channel her.
Kathy, I have a question. So, and this can be open to the other jurisdictions, is what happens when you usually for us, it comes with really old permits. Like I tore down my deck 5 years ago, and I'm trying to do something else on it, and oh my God, where are those tickets? That's happened a number of times. But what's the protocol for everybody when they absolutely do not have
The tickets.
their weight tickets?
Yeah, there's been a few. There hasn't been many. We
Same.
do we have them provide a separate sheet of paper, with some sort of culpable knowledge of what they had, and then we just have to accept that. In my 3 years in Mill Valley, I think there's been 2 that does not have that, and they tend to keep that for their own purposes and records of what, so they can get it. And I've also told them to go back to their facility to see if they can get something, but typically they don't, so
Does a typical
honor
receipt
system.
from, say, the dump, is that adequate? I mean, I've taken a truckload of stuff up, I pay whatever the minimum was, but there's not exactly a weight or anything, and it's just a receipt for
Right.
dumping a truckload of stuff.
Right.
How do they know they don't
That's
use the same
different.
receipt for their 5 jobs?
Yeah.
So they're supposed to have the weight on the.
It'll say tons or yards,
It'll
typically
say
always.
something.
It'll charge you, the minimum they'll charge is 1 cubic
I was
yard,
gonna-
and
Is it
it'll
when you-
say on
when
there.
you go-
That's,
We'd
You
like
go
to
on the
see
weight and then you
the
go off the
address
weight.
of the job site on the receipt.
Even a little pickup truck.
I'm just thinking, for the contractors that I'm working with, like bringing
Do you
receipts,
always
I've
see
never
it?
checked
I
the
don't-
weight.
Here's not about those guys with
It'll
trailers.
say by yard or tonnage is always, and on a pickup truck,
They're not
it'll
putting
give
They
you a by
charge you,
yard.
Address
they charge you for that
Yeah.
race.
And they're not
You have
weighing
to
it
do
either,
that
they
way.
just go through the scale house and get a receipt, the tag,
Yeah.
but it's just on the visual, it's not by weight.
Yeah, that is a challenge. So,
Where are they locating rates?
At
At the Marin
Marin
Resource.
Resource, yeah, if they go through, if you're getting like the guys with trailers that are bringing them in, They just go by the box size. They can do a visual, like how many cubic yards, but they don't weigh them.
They'll tell you the yardage, so they'll tell you yard or weight, but they'll always give you one.
Yeah, it's gonna be by yards, right, but it's not, you go over the scale, but they're not weighing it.
Well, we have some
Once you
conversion
think
factors.
Yeah.
for you.
Right, that's
Yeah,
you can
we
use
do.
a conversion factor,
So-
and even square footage factors on
Yeah.
houses, those all exist
But
too.
at that point,
That's
it's
right.
kind of redundant, because, I mean, it's getting separated anyway, right? I mean, it's, all the materials coming out are getting
Yeah, but we just need proof. We need proof
Yeah.
that that's, we didn't just take it to the dump.
Hence your new form has
Right.
cubic yards per ton.
Yes, so we have conversion factors on the new advanced method form. So everybody should have gotten a copy. It's all blue, so that makes it a little bit visually distinct. And so there's conversion factors for cubic yards to tons. And just note that the calculation of the 65% under the advanced method, you need to select whether you're using tons or cubic yards. Luckily, under the easy method, which is all that we've been talking about so far, you don't need to do any calculations at all. You just have to deliver 100% of the materials that leaves the job site to a certified facility. The other, what's that?
And prove it.
Improve it. Yes, exactly. Turn in your documentation.
Right.
I think another problem that was just brought up is the question of like whether the amount of materials is representative, is a reasonable amount to have come out of that job site. So we do have a new, I'm calling it a cheat sheet. What's the word? Guidance form that we're going to be distributing to the building counters, and you're going to get an email from me, like I was emailing last year, with a copy of that form. It has a little table in there. We didn't bring copies of it, but it has a table in there that gives you a guidance about what amount of material you should be expecting from a particular size per square foot. And we have it by like bedroom remodel or bathroom, or because it's different amounts depending. And it's just really like a kind of estimate. At the end of the day, it's going to be different depending on what the exact job is. So there's a certain amount of discretion that you have to use, and sort of reasonableness. Yeah, it's at least something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kelly?
I have another question for Kathy. Do you guys look at these on the site, or
No.
is it just they turn it in?
They turn it in
Same
prior,
thing with us.
they turn it in prior to final.
Yeah, so that's kind of hard. I'm just sitting in an office and I
Yeah.
get a bunch of receipts and I look at the project scope and square footage and I don't know. They turn in receipts, I'm gonna sign it off. So
Yeah. So the hope is that the new table is going to help at least kind of right size that. I think, yeah.
What's the advantage of the more difficult method over the easy method to the contractor? Because my experience is the path of least resistance is what they
Yeah.
want to take.
Mhm.
So is there any advantage to the
Advanced method. So the easy method, I think, is the path of least resistance. The challenge is that it's not going to cover every single project. So the intention in allowing the advanced method is to allow for, if there is a circumstance that is not perfectly in alignment with the easy method, that it's still an option that's available.
yeah, like if you reuse everything and you don't produce any receipts, you could document that on your advanced method.
Through the
right?
advanced method, that's right.
Yeah, I had someone call and say I had a pool, and then I had all this dirt that was created, and then I took that dirt to another site and I used it there. And I have no evidence that I did that, but that's what happened. So I don't have any receipts. What do I do?
Mhm.
So we directed them to the advanced method to document. You know, I mean, of course, ideally, photos would have been taken, some sort of documentation, and I don't know that happened, but that's.
For the comment about like how like contractors might cheat, what if we're having like a barcode method where every project gets some sort of barcode, the contractor takes that with the permit, and it gets scanned at the facility, and it's on the receipt, so that when they hand it in, it's like, this belongs to this project.
Or even better yet, with an app.
With an
It's
app,
an app, and then we're
barcode,
out.
and it goes into a database, and it's like, we know that, whatever it is,
The
Yeah.
NCCAG
21
honesty app, let's do it.
21 Vogue ended up here, we have proof because
There actually is an app for that is called Starlight, and I'm not plugging it. I've never used it, but I know some people in the area are now maybe starting to use it, where it does track. It's for contractors, so you can order debris boxes, and then it tracks all of it through, and you can put in lead specifications or Marin County specifications for it.
like with the permanent, so that you know what's coming back.
Because I think also what happens sometimes is contractors will pick up if they're small loads, or they'll consolidate, right? So they went to 3 or 4 places, and then they consolidate it, and then they take it and have you push that out. You've got one receipt for 4 job sites. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. It's just complication.
But
The
isn't
advanced
that-
map.
Shouldn't technically that be their problem and not our problem? I mean, you're
What
asking jurisdiction
specifically?
a lot. We're primarily looking at life safety. And we have high paid, I'd like to think they're high paid, maybe they're not high paid enough, but we have high paid inspectors that we're really looking at life safety to survive earthquake or fire or electrical shock. And those things, I have a feeling we're probably not spending as much time on those as we would like. And then we're asking energy code and green recycling. It's just really gets thin. I mean, in my view, I think we're subtracting away from life safety of the project. And then if something falls through and they don't have the receipts, then what happens? They either lie about it to get us approval, or is there a penalty? Do we fine them for not doing it, or?
That's an option that is employed by many jurisdictions, and would be an option for your city if you wanted to do that. It would be a little bit different from the county-wide form that's available, but there's always the option to add an extra sheet in the middle or something like that describing a city-specific scenario. So it's definitely always an option. You would have to have that in your municipal code. It's something that we've helped many cities with in the past. Yeah.
But basically, we're using the you're not supposed to get final until you can prove. That's the sort of
Yeah.
You're not going to get your final unless you turn in the paperwork. And I totally hear what you're saying, and I agree. I really want you guys to be focusing on life safety issues. That's why the easy method is sort of out there, and that's why you spend like an hour a year kind of getting trained on what it is, but that, we want you to do as best you can, reasonably, and focus on the really important things all the time. So we're not asking you to, I don't want you to get stuck here. We're trying to make this as easy as possible, but it is code. We do need to meet our diversion goals. We do want to do the best we can with the resources that are being generated. So, we're just trying to strike a balance, but if you have to choose, definitely choose earthquake safety.
Right. Better for our great grandchildren.
Yeah.
This world. But I was just wondering. So each jurisdiction has these cardstock, and I see somebody out of my peripheral vision putting a sticker on each one. With that said, the Energy Commission is, you go to Energy Commission and you can tell the contractor, we even have a quick form that they can do a fillable document, download it, have it printed, bring that in prior to final, and here's your CF2Rs, boom, 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 whatever's pertinent to their job. Can this also be that way so that you could go on a site, print it?
It is available online.
It is, so we can give them a sheet of paper,
With a link.
with a link that they can go there, put this in, download it, and, I heard somebody last year say, well, we make them out of cardstock because they're contractors and they lose them. But I think doing the link would be better, plus we would not forget to give them this form, which we have so many times. You know, there's instructions, and when you are trying to, issue a permit for a fairly large remodel or addition, there's so many components to that, not just the plans and the permit card. And so then there's this and everything else.
So once they fill this out and turn it into us and we say it's okay, what do we do with it? Just
File
archive
it. File it, keep it. And I would say for at least 5 years. And the only way that anyone's ever gonna ask you about it is if actually the state comes knocking and says, how are you doing with your construction and demolition program? I'd like to see evidence that you guys are getting these C&D forms filled out. So there's that's the paperwork kind of, you know, the day that the state decides to come visit, that you have evidence of that. And then in terms of just the diversion, you know, again, that we're trying to highest and best use of materials and keeping as much as we can out of the landfill. The longer we can keep our landfills open, the less expensive the disposal costs will be for everybody. And a lot of the materials that you guys are dealing with that are generated at job sites are materials that have other can be repurposed or, you know, are better served by not being in the landfill. So
recognizing who the target is for all this, it is the contractor. And it's in the contractor's best interest to expedite that final, so he can get all of his money and he can be done with the job. So whatever we can do to expedite that service for them, like going online and having all this done in advance.
That's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna have these, I'll have a sample of the form, but I think it's so much easier. I myself have forgotten, and then I'm telling them when they.
And there's a typo in the label, we just.
When they come in to grab the form, and I have to give the form to Becky, my admin assistant, to remember when that guy comes in, it's just like,
It's not right. Okay, well, that's good feedback. I mean,
Is
it's supposed to be helpful.
I totally think that's a better way, and I think the contractors are, and because it works with the CF2Rs. I mean, we just tell them how to do it, and we go into the search box and then download it, whatever's pertinent to your job, and give it to me.
Yeah.
It seems like you got thousands of contractors, but you only have a handful of places where they can take this stuff. Why aren't they just dealing with the places that take the stuff and make them separate it and call it done?
Yeah. And simple.
That's not what the way Cal Green is running. You guys are integral to the way that
Cal Green's
that is the intention of having certified facilities.
Right.
To really direct everything to those.
Like Redwood,
Yeah.
I mean, if they would start separating them, like stop letting the guys dump out in the pit, but do a floor where
They
they
are
dump there.
actually building one.
I know but they've been saying that for years,
Well,
you know.
I think we're getting close.
Right.
But Cal Green is more of a macro law, if
Yeah,
you will.
yeah.
Our local area, everything goes to, winds up getting sorted. There really isn't a place you can't dump, you can
Yeah.
dump it that isn't. So there should be some sort of an exemption process if that's the only facility you can use. It's just a lot of bureaucratic layers that really doesn't accomplish anything if it's gonna wind up going to these facilities anyway. I don't know who approaches Cal Green with that kind of a solution, but if the only facilities that are utilized are separation facilities, why the form? I mean, other areas, rural areas and things where people can dump in facilities that aren't separating, then I see a need for it. But when the only facilities that are
You're right, and on
realistic,
our island of Marin, what are our options
Yeah.
really?
there should be some sort of a process to get us out of that.
Right, and then we could save all the.
Then the deadness would
What's the
pretty much
cost
go
of
away.
these? I mean, I don't know.
All the confusion and all the fight,
And all the paperwork and all the.
So my other question is this on all sides project? Somebody mentioned like they're replacing a deck. So
Cal Green covers anything that changes the square footage of a building.
So it's also demos, right?
Yeah.
I see a lot of those.
Yeah.
So changing the square footage, so if they did a remodel and there's no square footage change.
Technically would not be covered under Cal Green. For simplicity's sake, we recommend that you just pass out the form to everyone so that all of the contractors sort of know that they're gonna have the form, that they're gonna need to do documentation for projects.
When they really need to do it.
Yeah.
But technically,
Yeah.
it's only for projects that add square footage.
Yeah.
So, and is that habitable square footage? Because a deck, in my mind,
We
doesn't
give
really
them
add
to
square
everybody,
footage.
don't we?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't say habitable, so
So
I
if you've got a whole
would
building-
think that it
Well,
would also be
the
covered.
deck
Why wouldn't
example was
one
that
give them
they
this
tore
one?
down the deck, so they had to get a demo permit.
Right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but even
Right.
if they're gonna, even if they're gonna replace a deck, and then if they replace a deck that doesn't require building code, because it's under 30 inches, or flat work, that doesn't require building code.
Yeah.
then-
Did you say,
I mean, if you've got the whole, pardon?
Yeah.
And demo.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
demolition.
change square footage,
And demolition.
Yeah.
So if you demo a whole building,
Yeah.
not or.
Demolition, yes, that's
Okay.
right.
But if you demo a kitchen, like remove cabinets, tile.
Would it be possible
drywall.
for me to get back on that question?
Yeah.
It might be something that I would need to check with one of like the regulators about, cause that is like a pretty specific level of detail. Yeah,
That's what we deal with on a daily basis.
yeah,
Well, if you just look at the big picture and look at what the intent is, then obviously demolishing a deck would fall into it, whether technically some lawyer would say the words aren't there. I mean, the intent is to get the stuff recycled.
yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, almost everything that's done, at least in my world here in Marin County, goes to the people there in San Rafael. The contractor knows he's not gonna take that demolished deck and dump it in a creek someplace. I mean, he'd be so subject to, not only scorn, but civil liability. So they take it to the logical place, San Rafael. It's almost 90%, if not all,
Two
100%,
facilities here, I mean,
automatically
they're-
goes there, in Marin County anyhow.
So I don't know what the intent is, because it sounds like the intent,
we're
people
gonna
are
link
following it
we're gonna do
anyway.
links.
So,
And if they have
Well,
recycling.
I think the big picture, the intent is to recycle as much as you can and don't waste.
right, but if they're doing that, is it over-regulation what we're trying to do to have them?
I'm always on your side on that one. Over-regulation, I argue here that the more complicated we make the building permit, the less work it is for the building departments, because the fewer people are gonna bother to get a building permit.
Right, I mean, we have problems right now even getting additional full-time bodies. And so every time we get additional, and you're probably on our side too, every time you get additional mandate, somebody has to do that. And the city doesn't wanna hire FTEs.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
That's why your idea of just putting it online is simple.
well, that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, Kathy, I actually, when they don't come into the building department or whatever, I tell them they can just send it to me in an email. And they can scan it or take a picture.
I've
with their
done that
phone.
as well, yeah,
Super
it's,
easy.
we have a box, we put waste management in our inspection item line under finals, so unless that is checked off and approved by a building inspector or counter person, they don't get a final. So, that, it's gonna get done, one way or another.
And,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, while we're on this subject, I do also wanna just point out, like, and support Judith's earlier statement about reducing tons to landfill, because what we see on a statewide level is that, like, this really is a huge contributor to the material that's going to landfill. So no matter, like, how much time you spend source separating at your home, like, this is the hugest impact. Really, we see construction, waste management, and diversion to be a really essential piece of the statewide picture on achieving higher diversion. So it is really important on that basis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I make a comment on that? This, in one state of the California, you claim that you are ahead of the curve in all of the other states in the United States and
Yeah.
That's because you guys are
development.
doing such a good job.
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
Thank you.
but then on the other hand, the issue of the waste management, we're using the method of the construction based on the 18th, 19th century. So So we said, no, it's the time, the state is coming with mandated with new prefabricated manufactured tires, so this way we could reduce the overall
Right.
waste, because they will maybe still be banging 2x4 with a toenail to start, and then on the other hand, we're talking about the high end of the job, the top of the guys think. This is the problem with the equation, and in the middle we're dumping all of the pushing paper on the building department, do this, all of those band-aids, and we have, as you mentioned, we have a lot of more important thing because our eyes walk away from the job, and we are spending a lot of time on something to resolve a different way, a better way to help everybody. This should be the goal.
Well, I think trying to get these forms online and try to automate that is a very easy way to hopefully take some of that burden away.
But he's absolutely right with the pre-manufactured housing. If you manufacture in a factory, the waste factor is
Oh, yeah.
probably
And you can make it more
a
efficient.
fraction of what,
But what's
down to the smallest block.
Well, what's the market say about it? I don't see
So-
it anywhere.
Because the market still allows for people to go out and put a huge pile of wood, build a house, and by the time you got done, leave a huge pile of wood right next to the house that's up to the first story.
Yeah.
That's still what dictates the cost
Well, I've always heard
benefit
like,
factor.
would you rather have a car that was built in a factory or a car that was built in a driveway?
I came from Missouri, and when I got here, I was astounded by the fact that anybody even stick framed anything. Absolutely surprised. I didn't even know they did that. So I mean, that's how different than the manufacturing is over there. We manufactured everything in a wall plant, down to the siding, the walls, everything. Stood them up, put them out on the site, erected the whole building in a matter of days. But we do apartment buildings that way, everything. When I came out here, I saw this stick framing. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is how you do it in California.
And I hired you? You don't even know? Oh, great.
As a factory guy.
Man.
Well, the last house
Truth
I
comes out.
designed it specifically, 4-inch modules, everything was squared off, zero waste. The contractor laughed. He said, Bill, you gotta be kidding. There's no way he could do it. He hauled off box after box of waste, but I had very carefully designed it to have exact dimensions so that the plywood would fit, everything would fit, nothing fall.
I agree with that problem too.
Okay.
Trucked it in.
Okay, we're
So,
gonna just press
yeah, we
on
can
here.
go on to the next
Yeah.
slide then. Okay, so I feel like we're sort of, this seems like it's not even really fitting in the conversation right now. So, but there's two key pieces of engaging with the debris box haulers, which is something we've already discussed, is that the permit applicants have to ask for their stuff to be recycled and to get that weight ticket. And it again, the impetus is definitely on the contractor and not on the building department to do that. But they do need to know that they have to do that, so. Okay, so now we're talking a little bit about this new form. So the advanced method, we were talking, basically it's only if needed, if there's specific circumstances that are special about the project where it doesn't fit into the easy method. So that would be, so the very first page of the C&D recycling plan, at the very bottom, they're checking easy method or advanced method. If they check the advanced method, or at the end of the project, if it turns out that they didn't fall under the easy method after all. We're now providing this new construction waste management plan, which you all have a copy of.
And it's also online.
It's also online. And we'll have that link in the presentation a little bit later. So here we've sort of recreated what a construction waste management plan components could and probably should be. It's not the only possibility. It could be, construction waste management plan could include other things, but these are good best practices to include. And they're going to need to include all 4 of these pages, not just one page like under the easy method. So, you know, we can walk through this form a little bit more, but essentially what they're doing is doing a sketch of the job site to show where the separation containers are. They're calculating a diversion rate, and they're keeping track of the people on the site who have been trained in the construction waste management plan, which is this, and really that kind of means where the boxes are. Another example of who might use this is a deconstruction project, for example, might be a good candidate for using the advanced method. It also allows you to calculate a higher diversion rate than 65%. So that might apply for lead projects, for example. And you may have seen lead projects that tried to demonstrate higher diversion under something like the advanced method already. Has anybody seen anything like that? Nope. Okay. So certification that the people on the job site have seen and are trained in the construction waste management plan, and then the last page is the calculation of diversion. Something I want to emphasize here is that this is actually what's written in Cal Green as the required method for calculating diversion. The easy method is a simplified version. This is the core of what Cal Green is, and this is sort of what we've managed to avoid doing by allowing the easy method in Marin County. Okay. This is the website URL. I can send it out to anybody. If you want to grab my business card, I can also send it to you by email. And yeah, okay, next slide. Okay, I think we've pretty much covered everything on this slide. I don't want to waste your time on stuff that we've already sort of discussed. Okay, so now we can talk a little bit about the math that is on this page. So you can see that we're giving a space to fill out the material type for these various categories. We're providing a conversion factor because sometimes one box might be weighed in tons, but then other boxes are just in cubic yardage. So they need to select which method they're going to use to calculate the 65%. That's at the very top of the page here. And then they're filling out either the tons or the cubic yards that are recycled, salvaged, and landfilled. In a lot of cases, you're going to just see like asphalt, concrete, for example, just all of the material is in recycled, and you're not going to have like a split between recycled and landfill. And that's probably the case for nearly all these categories. You can see at the very bottom that we have garbage. So what I would expect to see in most cases is somebody's just filling out recycled for one or two of these material categories, and then they're filling out garbage. The exception here is that in some cases, probably in many cases, they're going to be delivering material as mixed C&D debris. This is the most complicated part. We're trying to make it as easy as possible, but essentially the contractor's going to need to fill out the diversion rate for that facility. That's going to essentially be a question that's asked of the facility at this point. So if it's 65%, for example, or marine resource recovery is 75%, you're filling that in under A. And then you have to calculate what percentage is recycled of that total material that's mixed C&D, and then the remainder is essentially landfilled. To get the diversion rate, you just add the tons down to the very bottom, the total, for each one of these categories, so recycled, salvage or reuse, and landfill. And then we step you through exactly what the calculation is to get the project diversion rate. That's recycled plus salvaged divided by the total tons equals the diversion rate. That number goes on the second page here.
That's not you guys doing this.
Right.
This is the contractors.
Yes.
It's just what they need to do.
So we had a contractor on Lock Lane who he's a good contractor, but we got away from him, and we had a phone call from a couple of neighbors, and they were just piling it in the backyard, not putting in any bins or not hauling it. There was such a huge pile, but it got to be such a pile that all the lunches from 2 weeks, 3 weeks were sitting there.
Yeah.
So half of the rats from the Mill Valley went over towards the north of the town.
Yeah.
And so I had to deal with the contractor. So I think that that person will probably be doing the advanced method from now on.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So-
That seems reasonable. Yeah, and that's a code violation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
More
Garbage
ways than one. But
Yeah.
I saw it says garbage here, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, his wouldn't even be in this column. It'd be all the way over here.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. Yeah.
And obviously, any percentage that's lower than 65% on this form is not fully compliant with Cal Green.
And then what happens?
We recommend that each city keeps track of the permit applicants that are not compliant with Cal Green, and if you see the same person showing up more than once, consider other actions.
Is there like a Cal Green fine or something that we can tell them that exists?
It's not a California statewide fine. A simple way of doing this would be just using your general code enforcement. If you have a fine or penalty that's associated with maybe violating code, that you could use that. And really, I would recommend implementing any sort of penalties in your municipal code.
That's tough.
Take that along with
I just talked to our code enforcement folks, and yeah, for the past 5 years, I don't know if they've had any, because there's so many steps involved in terms of going to county council and, you know, giving adequate notice and everything.
Yeah, so
That'd be a
I mean,
heavy lift.
yeah, a modification of code would probably allow you to simplify some of that.
But I mean,
But
just
think
with any
basically the idea is
violation, it's
right.
still hard.
So just, I mean, I think in terms of this, I think that it's like, okay, you guys screwed up, you know, you're here again, let's do it better this time.
Yeah, like
I
we
think
keep
that's
a
kind of the,
we keep a scofflaw list,
uh-huh.
you know, of folks that haven't turned in their receipts, like with the lost receipts from a permit from 10 years ago, and we just write down the name of the contractor and the
Right.
applicant, and if they come up again, we have a conversation.
Yeah.
I think this whole system will probably get better if we can get rid of the unlicensed contractors.
Right.
The unlicensed contractors are the worst violators of this plus many,
Other.
and we have to look a lot harder at life safety issues when we have these homeowner builders who are just paying these guys hourly rate without workers' comp. They're the ones that are throwing all this stuff in different bins and not even getting the receipts or not even doing whatever, and then it comes to the final, they're paid off, they're gone, we're dealing with a homeowner. Well, where's your receipts, where's your thing? Who has never saw this before in their lives, that's the problem. That's where,
Those guys,
nip
they
those
can't get the
guys.
garbage right. How do you think the building looks inside the walls, you know?
We got our little eyeball, we got eyeballs on each, we're getting a lot more eyeballs. I don't
House
know.
flippers.
We're getting a
Why
lot
don't you
more
just skip
eyeballs.
to the last slide?
Yeah.
And I have my contact information, and
I'm
this
just
is
sitting
the
in the
link.
hired drones.
You can write it down if you'd like.
But we can also send, I think we'll send everything out.
Yes, so I have email addresses that I was using last year for you